So I made you a little PowerPoint and try to get creative with it, but just basically getting from Hemingway's own ideas, like what is the iceberg theory, right? So he says in the quote, the first quote that I have in the second slide, he says, "I always try it with the principle of the iceberg. There are 7/8 of it underwater for every part that shows." So Hemingway wants to only show us the tip of something, the surface of something. And that when we are reading Hills Like White Elephants, we see this conversation, we see them having this sort of argument about whether or not to have an abortion, but we don't actually ever hear those words, right? And so that we're only given the surface of these people's relationship, but we can tell that there's so much more, right? So he's only giving us the top, but we can feel the weight of everything underneath it. And so the other quote from Hemingway is, "You can eliminate, yeah, anything you know you can eliminate, it only strengthens your iceberg." So basically, get rid of all like telling us everyone's backstory, just give us, media and res where we're right in the thick of it. Okay? Now, the quote that I really like is on the third page or the third slide. It says, "Hemingway stripped everything but the bare essentials from his stories and novels, leading readers to sift through the remaining dialogue and bits of narrative on their own." So basically, the whole point here is that you have to do the work of trying to figure out what was being said. And if you watched this before you read it, I apologize because I just spoiled it for you. But you have to figure it out through context clues. And I've had many classes where, people have read it and come in and we start talking about it and then like, what's this about? What's this about? And then someone says, "Oh, is it about an abortion?" And everyone has that light bulb moment at the same time. And so that's what I love about Hemingway in terms of the way he writes, is that by showing us, rather than telling us, we really get to do a lot of the heavy lifting, and it makes it more rewarding for us. And personally, on a side note, I think this is the way that we experience life, right? So the coffee barista that serves your coffee isn't going to tell you straight out that they don't like their job and they're unhappy with it. You can tell that through context clues if you're paying attention, though, how they talk to you, how they treat you, so on and so forth. And so since our daily life is trying to, figure out how people feel, that I think that we find this type of reading very rewarding because it mimics what we experience. And just to end, I know this is a very funny picture of Hemingway. I had a little fun with this one. This quote I think is really great, where he says that you want to make people feel something more than they understood. So for Hemingway, he wants to make you feel more than you know, right? For that's the important thing, that the feeling is more important than the knowing. Whether you know it's about an abortion doesn't matter. You feel the strain in their relationship. You see the breaks in it. You see that it's probably going to end. This is not going well. And that the feeling of that is way more emotionally satisfying and significant than just knowing, like, oh, this couple's having a fight over an abortion. Lastly, in terms of popular culture, there's a lot of examples of this sort of iceberg theory. The one right off the top of my head was Inception, especially the ending of it. Since this movie is like a decade old at this point, I feel safe in spoiling it for you. But the ending of Inception is very open-ended, up for debate, maybe really frustrating for some of you. But the reason I bring it up is that I think it really goes back to what Hemingway is saying. Christopher Nolan, the director and writer, knows the ending. If Cobb is with his kids or not with his kids, if this is a dream or not a dream. He knows what the ending is. He withholds that from us because that allows us to sift through the material and really try to get it on our own. David Lynch is another filmmaker who is really great at this, where it's very sort of obtuse and obscure, but allows us to project our own meaning onto it. Lastly, In terms of a recap on the last slide, the quote where Hemingway says, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." That's an actual story. That sentence, and in that sentence, it perfectly encapsulates everything you need to know about the iceberg theory. That you read that sentence, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn," and you know so much about that person who wrote that advertisement in the ad, right? That you see, that you feel that there's a story behind it, that maybe they've lost their child, and you know what happened, you know why didn't the baby ever get to wear the baby shoes. And so there's so much that we feel about that story, which is only one sentence long, but not much we know. And so that's a really key part of the iceberg theory. All right, thank you for letting me talk to you about Hemingway. I could do this all day. I'll be putting the PowerPoint in this up very soon, and I hope to talk to you later on in the week about these important ideas. All right, bye.